Okay, good evening, or good whatever time of day it is if you're joining us on Zoom. Welcome to the February 2026 meeting of the Northern California Underwater Photographers Society. It's great to see everyone here tonight, as you are. I hope you all did all the right things in advance to have a trippy evening alongside the CEO of Backscatter, who's going to talk to us this evening about Fluoro, or fluorescence photography. If you don't know him already, Jim Decker is a longtime member of this society, a fellow Pennsylvanian, and I guess a fun fact that I learned tonight is he was in book publishing before becoming over to the dark side here, and the rest, as you all know, is history. Jim has been a mentor to me and so many other people from day one, and has really radically helped to improve my photography. Anybody who's been to the digital shootouts probably are aware of all of his poses with the strobes and everything else. It's a wonderful experience, a great chance to learn, so I hope folks are taking a look at that in tandem for this year and beyond. So with that, I'd like to welcome Jim. Jim obviously does tremendous amounts here as the CEO of Backscatter, but he's also been a pioneer with a lot of interesting hardware that Backscatter has brought along the way, and I'm going to let him talk all about the fluorescence filters.
Cool. Thank you, Madam Vice President. Our president is right now, Becca, she is in Truck Lagoon, diving the wondrous wrecks that are there. So before we get into all the Fluoro stuff, there is some business we need to take care of. Just a reminder for those people on Zoom, if you want to join, or if there's anybody here that has not joined, go ahead and do the QR code for joining NCUPS. Help support your local or not so local underwater photography club. Second Friday of every month is when we meet up here at Backscatter and off into the internet lands as well. So before we get into the Fluoro stuff, I'm going to introduce Thomas, who you might know here from Backscatter, and he is our Judge of the Month. So for everybody who submitted some images for the mini comp, we have Thomas here who will give you some feedback and go over the images with you guys, and then after that we'll get into stuff about Fluoro photography. Thanks, Thomas.
Of course. Thank you, Jim. Thank you, Suzanne. All right, so for January, the theme of the mini comp was sea life portrait. So kind of when I'm thinking portraits, I want to see much like a portrait of a person, something tight, something up close. We want the personality to shine through. We're looking for things like eyes and other very personal features of that subject. So photos that were nice and tight and included a lot of those features were put in higher up in the ranking than those that might have been a little bit less cohesive in that regard. That might have had a little too much background, or maybe the personality of the subject didn't quite shine through the same way. So let's go ahead and start going through some of these. So we're going to start with our commended images. So first off, we have this image from Mark Cragg, who I don't see here. Hopefully he's joining us on Zoom. It's a really excellent portrait photo. The subject is really filling the whole image here. We've got eye contact. We can see that little mouth. It's really awesome. So really great job on that, Mark. Some areas to really bring it to the next level would be if we had perhaps a darker background to really make the subject pop first and foremost. But overall, really solid work. Our next up for commended is by the anonymous photographer with this excellent octopus eye contact here. So some great textures, a really cool shot of just up close looking into the soul of this particular critter. If I were to move it up to the next level, I'd probably want maybe a little more space, let the other eye show up a tiny bit more, the back of its eye, and then once again, maybe try to eliminate that background a little bit more, get it a little darker, because it is a little busy. But really awesome job. Whoever it is shot this, thanks so much for submitting it. And then next up, we have another really nice tight portrait of a fish here. Looks like a red Irish lord. Really charismatic subject. We've got the eye right there. We can see that super clearly. A good portrait, I kind of want to make it feel like you can have a conversation with the subject a little bit, right? And there it is staring right at us. If I were to kind of want to bump it up once again to the next level, the bit of that yellow over there on the side, it's a little distracting, kind of takes focus away from just how beautiful that fish is. But overall, really solid work. Definitely keep it up. All right, so now we're going to get into the placed images. So for 6th, we have Zachary Powell with this really awesome photo of these bull sharks. And when I was kind of talking about like the emotional feeling that you get or kind of the personality of the subject that we want to shine through, I feel like they're going to take my lunch money or something like that. Like they look like they're going to mug me. So there is like, it definitely evokes an emotion, a feeling. I really like the underside lighting of it. Actually kind of helps with the subjects really looking more intimidating. Usually it's not a lighting practice that we tend to really get into in underwater photography, but it works for this subject. Now if I wanted to boost it up and push it further along into this, it looks a little soft, a little grainy, maybe like it was cropped slightly, or something along those lines. And some of the light looks a little warm. It could have done with a little bit of a white balance, but overall, super great work. I really like this image. Next up, for 5th place, we've got Christina Chapman with another shark. This one, we've got a razor sharp image there. Subject is super well lit. It's a fantastic image. We got a great background there and everything. What I would like to see to really boost it would be let's get the subject in there more first and foremost, a stronger kind of presence of the main subject here. We've got a lot of background, which is great and makes it an awesome wide angle image. But when I'm thinking portraits, I just want something a little bit tighter. I want to once again feel a little more like I'm having the conversation with the subject, not like it's approaching me. But this is a killer split and a really interesting image to look at. So next up, we have Brandon Huelga, who is a wonderful local diver. And he's got this great sheep head over here. This subject, it's filling the frame brilliantly. Like once again, you can kind of feel like you can have a conversation with that. We got the eye, we got the teeth. We got a little bit of a background, but the background isn't the whole story here. We're really thinking about the subject more than anything. Now, what could make it a bit stronger is our strobes are probably a little too far out for how close the subject is. It is touching the dome more than likely. These guys can get pretty curious, especially this individual that was hanging out on the wall for a while was really awesome while it was there. It was just approaching you, and you could shoot it all day. It was awesome. And it kind of ended up with that little bit of that shadow on its chin, which is a teeny bit distracting. That and overall, if I were to once again take this really awesome image and try to make it even more awesome, I'd probably want to get a little bit more eye contact or a little bit more teeth or a little bit of both, just to really kind of sell the mug of this critter, because they're really charismatic and they're super ecologically important too. Sheephead are great critters. And then in 3rd, we've got Keith Kirkpatrick, who's another local shooter here in Monterey, does some great stuff. There we go. So we've got an excellent shot of a market squid here during that squid run back in August, which was super cool. This is a tricky one to pull off because our background is very busy, but he managed to really light that one subject, kind of give us an idea of like an individual in the crowd, which I really liked, and overall really kind of broke up that kind of chaotic scene. If you've ever been diving with the squid, it is insane. It's really hard to narrow down on one subject. So really good job, Keith, on that. And then moving on to 2nd, we got another shark. So this is Sage Ono with a lovely schooling shark or soup fin shark or whatever you like to call them. But once again, we got that subject really taking front and center in the frame, making great eye contact. Once again, the personality of the fish is kind of shining through a little bit. You can feel like you can talk to it. Really awesome image. Definitely a high-ranking image here. And then last up, we've got Jenna Emery with this beautiful sheep head. It's probably the exact same individual on the wall. But this image, its face is taking up pretty much the entire frame there. The background isn't too distracting. It's really helping the individual that we're looking at. We've got super solid eye contact. It's lit extremely well. And once again, I feel like we could have a conversation. You could give this guy a voice almost, you could really see it. So really awesome work there, Jenna. Overall, it was really difficult ranking all these, and if you've ever attended any of our competitions, it's kind of that same thing where you can go through it one day and rank everything in one way, and maybe the next day it's completely different. So definitely keep submitting images. We want to see more. So now, kind of wrap up a little bit more of January here. We've got our videos. So once again, we pretty much want the same things that we want in a portrait for a photo, but in video. So we really want to see that subject nice up and close. We want to have their personality really shine through. We don't necessarily want like a wide angle shot of something that's too far away. We want to know what's kind of going on with that subject here. So without further ado, third place, right back to Jenna Emery. Good job, Jenna. And here's our video. So super cool video there. Yeah, beautiful humpback whale there. I really enjoyed that video. We get the subject coming in nice and close. Of course, it's a super charismatic subject, so that always helps, when we're doing some kind of a portrait. It's nice and stable, except for that kind of little bit of that turn at the end. I know how difficult this can be in those moments. It'd be great if we could get maybe a couple more angles or something spliced in there. Maybe a little tighter somehow, but it's not always possible in the heat of the moment. But really awesome work. And then next up, our second place is Christina Chapman. So really cool video there. I like it. Melodies are really awesome critters, and we've had a ton of them around recently, which has been just a total delight. But I love the multiple angles. We've got different kind of views of the subject. It really gives a subject that, I don't know, it's kind of, they don't really have much of a face, but we kind of give it some personality there, which I really like. The music is also super well fitting of it too. It's very, very relaxing, kind of gives you that dreamy feeling of looking up into a kelp canopy. All right, and then in first place, we've got another Emery. We've got James Emery right over here with his fantastic video. So super cool stuff. We got a really nice tight shot of this wolf eel. Once again, we have that kind of that personality shines through. We've got multiple angles on it. We've got a good background. We have a background. We also have it much tighter in as well. But really solid, just beautiful work there. So definitely submit more video. We definitely don't have as many video submissions as we do photos. So for those of you out there, submit more video. We'd love to see more. It's a really awesome way to practice this medium. So next up, we've got super macro for February. And macro itself is a great way to get started for underwater photography for some new people. It's a little bit easier to control those scenes, but for me, it always feels like it's the hardest way to really make an image become truly breathtaking. It takes a really special skill to elevate a macro image to the next level. Super macro, when I hear that phrase, that makes me think really close. Not just, let's say, like a fish portrait, something kind of like what we saw before, which might be a pretty narrow shot, but something small, maybe into abstract territory. So we're talking really close subjects. For any macro image, sharpness is really important. You can find the coolest subject in the world, but if you don't get it in focus, it's, cool, we saw the ID shot, but we really want to nail that focus. We really want to see that subject. So take a lot of photos when you find something cool, basically, is the moral there. Also, lighting, really key too. So we want to make sure our lighting doesn't flatten out our subject, that our lighting casts shadows, gives it dimension. That is super important for us. So first up on our commended is Mr. Mackenzie's, right over here. So we have a beautiful fringe head. Was this shot over at the wharf? Okay, awesome. So fringe head and some water cypera bryozoans. These subjects are awesome. They're great to get nice and close to. The depth of field's cool. We get a good kind of idea of its eye and its sort of antlers there situated. If we were to push it up to the next level, I'd either go like full high key on the background and really blow it out and get it much brighter, or whoops, or uh-oh, Jim. There we go. Or go for the low key, go for the black background. But overall, super good work on that image. Love those guys. Next up on commended is Sage Ono with a super close-up of a comb jelly of a ctenophore. I love these critters. They're some of my favorite animals out there in the ocean. I really love the risk of taking a much more abstract photo. I really appreciate that. It's a really difficult photo to pull off. These subjects are really soft. I mean, some of the ctenophores out there, they have the consistency of like wet tissue paper. So if you get bubbles anywhere near them, they'll just explode. It can be really hard to get a maybe sharp or defined image out of it. But I know Sage, and I know he loves taking these close-up shots of drifters and jellies and things like that, and he's workshopped those really brilliantly. You know, it's just a difficult shot to pull off, I would say, getting the right amount of contrast and the right amount of maybe texture off of that subject. But really cool. I think it's a really interesting image to look at. All right, so fourth place, we've got Jenna Emery, once again, just kind of cleaning up today. So we got a really awesome high key and shallow depth of field image of this, it looks like a little sea hare or nudie of some kind. I really love the color palette here, really simple with the bright green in the whites. The subject is sharp for the most part, so its eye is right there. I love its little eye spot that you can see. Its little rhinophore that's leading us is a little soft, and that kind of, once again, is the challenge of this whole type of shooting. It's an excellent shot. It's just super hard to maintain your depth of field sometimes with these super small subjects, but I really love it. I love the way the texture comes through. It's an awesome image. Great work, Jenna. And next up, we got Brandon Huelga again, another very similar shot for third place here. So another kind of small in the frame macro image of a little Shaun the Sheep. I love the way the textures fall out here and the way the depth of field kind of brings us out into infinity. It's really awesome. These super tiny subjects are super hard to shoot. And once again, the leading rhinophore is a little soft, which is really easy to do with these subjects. But I love the composition, I love the textures of the image. You really kind of get the idea of the scale of the subject and it kind of trudging through this piece of algae here. And then next up, we have second place. We got Mr. Tim Nelson, I believe is in the chat right now. So really awesome image. We're talking about getting super close up to a subject. The use of symmetry is really fantastic too. I really enjoy that. It's a kind of image that you could very happily center. And the depth of field is also very pleasing too. You get to see all those really fine pinnate, feather-like hairs coming off of this feather duster worm. If we had gotten it a little sharper right in the center, that would probably bring it up to the next level, but overall, really awesome job, Tim. And then for first place, we've got Christina Chapman. So really great shot here. We have a really nice sharp image. We're kind of doing somewhat of that small in the frame type of image as well. The subject is hanging out there in its environment. It's not taking up the whole frame, but what gives us a sense of scale. We have really awesome eye contact there. We're looking directly at it. Its eye just pops from the polyps of the coral there. Really beautiful shot. Really great job, Christina. So next up is super macro video, and so shooting macro images can be difficult enough. Shooting macro video is really hard. One of the reasons is that it's very gear dependent. You need something to keep your system steady. You need a tripod. There's really no other way to do it without making everybody seasick looking at your images. We didn't have that many submissions. It'd be really great to see more for this. It is difficult, but it is super rewarding. If you're spending the entire dive shooting some small subjects just to get a couple second long clip, but it is really awesome to pull off. So we wanted a lot of the same stuff that we saw for the super macro images. So we wanted our subjects to be nice and sharp. We wanted to have a solid depth of field on them and also good lighting. And the most important added thing is stability. We want to see a nice stable image. So something like a tripod here, of course, is a must. All right, and coming right back in here, got second place is Christina Chapman. Awesome work, Christina. So we had a nice sequence there, multiple different views of the subject, and some little bit of behavior there at the end. It could have used a little bit more stability, but sometimes that's difficult with the subject matter we might be working with, but that would have helped push it up to the end, or maybe something even tighter on that subject. But overall, really good work. And then for first place, we have Mr. James Emery once again. So let's check this out. So really cool shot there. We're getting super tight in on that subject. We're kind of in almost abstract territory, and just what an incredible eye that fish has. So sharp, stable, everything that we really want from some super macro video. So really solid work there, James. Yeah, once again, we didn't have a ton of video submissions, so really get out there, shoot some video, throw it in, workshop stuff. It doesn't have to be the greatest thing we've ever seen or anything like that. Just get it in, practice it, get those reps in on shooting some video for next comp. And next comp, I believe, is nudibranchs. We'll touch on that a little bit later at the end of the show as well. All right, so I'm going to welcome back Mr. Jim Decker right over here, and he's going to tell us about the wonderful, trippy world of fluoro imaging.
Yeah, we had a question in the chat here, so I'm going to read that real quick before we go into the fluoro. For super macro, since digital displays probably are less sharp than a fine original shot, do pros recommend the max aperture f number, even f32, despite losing some max resolution? And that's from Chris Kidding.
Gotcha. So that'll really depend on the subject that you're shooting. Once you start introducing those more stop-down apertures, you're going to run into more image quality issues in terms of like diffraction and those kinds of things. So you got to be a little careful. It depends on kind of what you're trying to pull off. In general, if you're trying to play it safe, kind of f22 is sort of our safe jump setting for that. But if you're shooting something really small, you might want to consider a much higher aperture. Or kind of take it in the other direction if you want to have that shallow depth of field look and open it up. But yeah, it really depends. If you have a nice subject and you're working with it, don't just shoot one set of settings and leave it. Shoot everything. Shoot it open, shoot it more stop down, play with your settings. There's no one recipe that's really going to make it work.
Hello, Tom.
All right, Jim.
Hey, Tom.
All right. Thank you, Thomas. Lovely judging there. Not judging, you're judging. All right. So, I want to talk about fluoro, getting trippy with fluoro. Fluorescence is interesting because it's more than just glow-in-the-dark fish. If I said that to a scientist, which I have before, calling glow-in-the-dark fish, they immediately jumped down my throat saying, well, it's not glow-in-the-dark fish because that would be bioluminescence, not fluorescence. Fluorescence is when you take a certain wavelength of light and shine it on a subject and it returns a different wavelength of light back. For fluorescence, we typically see things. So we have to use like a blacklight. Kind of think like a blacklight poster, right? You know, the Jimi Hendrix one or the Led Zeppelin dude with the lantern. Yes? College dorms? Yes? Okay. And lava lamp going and everything. So that is fluorescence because you need a black light to light up the poster to return those different colors. When you turn on a regular light, it doesn't look like that at all. So that's what fluorescence is. So there is, something like this mushroom coral. It's pretty drab underwater, but then when you hit it with, technically I'm hitting this with blue light. So we're taking the spectrum of light and narrowing it down. I'll get into the equipment that we use a little bit later on. But this is typically like a tan type of color underwater, and then you hit it with this, and this is what it looks like when you do fluorescence. So, this mushroom coral actually looks like you've been on shrooms. So what is fluorescence? So the one wavelength come back as a different color. It gives an extremely vivid and neon look to the image. It's just like those blacklight posters. It's like a really trippy effect, dude. So I think from an artistic standpoint, it gives a completely different take on the subjects that you're doing. And like I said before, it's not bioluminescence. It is fluorescence. Bioluminescence would be down in Big Sur. There's a big bioluminescence thing in the ocean that was happening a few years ago that a few people got a picture of. Ostracods are another description of bioluminescence. Lightning bug, I guess, or a firefly would be another thing for that. But for artistic purposes, it gives the same old subject a whole new different look to it. So let's go over the gear that you need to do that for. So the gear, you need a few different things. Number one, you take a normal strobe and you put on what's called a fluorescence excitation filter. What that does is on those filters, it's a multi-layer filtering system to narrow the bandwidth of, imagine the light, that much of a spectrum, and you're narrowing it down to just one thing, usually around 450 nanometers if you're going to be nerdy about it. And actually the 450 nanometers we found is a little bit better at exciting the fluorescence compared to UV. UV is a much weaker effect, using a UV light for it, which is usually what the blacklight posters are doing. And so what happens is when this light comes on, everything looks like it's completely bathed in blue. And you will see some fluorescence coming back from that. But then what you do is you take the opposite of blue on the color wheel, which is yellow, and you add the yellow barrier filter, is what it's called, and put that in front of the camera lens. And you can also put that for some reason it won't show. That's fine though. But you have a mask visor you can put over your mask. And that mask visor, being yellow, will then minus out all the blue. So when that happens, the only thing you're seeing is what's being returned as fluorescence, because not everything fluoresces. Organic material will fluoresce. And of course, special inks designed to fluoresce will also glow like that. But not everything fluoresces. It can be really kind of trippy and scary at night when you put on this yellow mask and then you have the blue light, because all the blue gets minused out, and if nothing's fluorescing, it's pitch black, so you don't see anything. But then if you shine stuff like hard corals fluoresce really well, if you're in the Caribbean especially, if you just take your light and hit it on the hard corals, you just see every color of the rainbow. It looks like Avatar underwater when it lights up like that. It's really cool. So the fluorescence excitation filter will narrow it down to 450 nanometers. The yellow barrier filter will block the blue and just return the fluorescence to the camera. Typically, I just set my white balance on the camera to 5500 Kelvin or auto, and that'll be fine. That'll work just fine. Oh, there goes Thomas. So this is just a lizardfish, nothing special. But then when you do it in fluoro, it turns into that. And so what you'll see is like there's the colors are drastically different when you're looking at this, and not all lizardfish fluoresce. Some of them do, some of them don't. You just have to kind of hunt around and find things that do. And as you can see, all the substrate on the bottom, that's all that organic material, glows red. I know like from trees and stuff, if you do this on land, usually like chlorophyll will glow red, not green. Very interesting. Quite a boring kind of anemone there, shot, not very exciting. But then you do it in fluoro, and it looks like that. And we have there we go. So this guy very colorful during the day, but what happens when you fluoresce on it? It turns into this. So, and when saw this one, I was like, well, just let me see what it does. When I take a picture of it, it's very drab, boring subject. This would definitely lose the mini comp, for sure. But this one might win it, you know. So it's when I was looking at this, my daughters said this looks like it's from the Upside Down. If you're a Stranger Things fan, so just various things that look quite different when you. And some things you can even tell, like, man, you look at this, like, this is definitely going to fluoresce. You can look at it, just see that, and that's what it looks like when you do it. So that's what kind of like before and after what things look like. Kind of, you can take like very extremely boring subjects and actually make something out of it. So when for the settings, let's kind of go over what some of these settings would look like. For photo, f8 to f11 is typically what I do, and the ISO can be all over the place from 400 to 300. And the shutter speed, we're trying to knock out as much ambient light as possible. So doing the shutter speed all the way up as fast as you can get it is a good thing. And any weak effect that's kind of bleeding into it will kind of get knocked out if you're using like a target light or something for it to excite your fluorescence when you're hunting for things. Now you're like, wow, this sounds kind of weird. Why would you be up at like 3200 for something like that? And the thing is, fluorescence is a very weak kind of effect. It's not very strong. Even like you put the gnarliest black light onto your Led Zeppelin poster, and it's not going to light up the whole room. It's a dark effect. And so to get some sort of exposure on the camera, we usually need to jack up the ISO quite a bit and also use the apertures. The reason I go f8, f11 for macro, and most of this, what you're seeing is macro for this, is because I'm trying to maintain some level of depth of field. Otherwise, I dump the f-stop down even lower for it. But that's generally what I'm doing. It's like things that with eyes tend to fluoresce much weaker than things like anemones and hard corals and things like that. So think of like, or things with eye spots like nudibranchs or fish. Not all fish fluoresce, but those types of things like the lizardfish it was very difficult. That was probably at like ISO 3200 to get that thing to fluoresce. But then when I have something like like one of those anemones, that's probably down in the lower end of the range. In the Caribbean, I've even put it, things glow there really bright, so I can be down at ISO 100 with that. And usually I just leave the strobe on in manual at full dump because, again, it's such a weak effect, and you're taking this giant spectrum of light and narrowing it down to this. You're wasting so much energy by getting it down to that really narrow band of light for the blue. So with that filter, so it's blocking out so much light, so the strobe is always at full dump. I've never shot a fluoro picture anything less than a full dump on the strobe. Video. Again, you want to kind of maintain your depth of field, so f8 to f11, something like that would be good. Of course, if you have a subject that works for it and you can do a lower f-stop for less depth of field, more shallow depth of field, fine, go for it. But this is where I typically have shot things. However, because it's such a weak effect and strobes are so much more powerful than video lights, and you're narrowing the video light down, you're generally going to be ISO 10,000 and higher for the video. It's really, really difficult, and because of that, we're fighting the whole thing of not having enough exposure for the fluoro image. So usually wind up going to 30p instead of doing like 60 or 120 or something like that, and doing what they call 360-degree shutter, which is a 30th of a second, just to get more light into the camera, because it is such a weak effect. So it might sound crazy to go that high on your ISO and exposure settings, but you have to do it for the fluoro. It's like I've always said with any type of photography, people are like, well, you can't shoot that high. It's like, well, that's what the scene requires, so you can either do it or not do it. So you just have to go there if that's what the conditions are doing. I'm going to run through some images, and some of the things I want to talk about with this. These images that I shot, almost all of them were shot in Lembeh in Indonesia. And there's a couple from Bonaire that did a digital shootout last year. But the ones from Lembeh, I shot with the Sony A9 III camera. Now, what's special about that one is it doesn't have a mechanical shutter on it. It's an electronic shutter. And it's also a global shutter, meaning it takes all the pixels off the sensor at the same time. So for the uber nerds out there about thinking about these cameras, because of that, I don't have an upper flash sync speed limit on the camera, meaning that I can use any shutter speed I want on that camera and the flash will still appear in the image. Unlike other cameras, mirrorless and SLRs, typically their maximum speed they can shoot on the shutter with a flash is anywhere between 1/160 to 1/400. But most of them are in the range of 200 to 250. Now, the whole thing with fluoro is you've got to not have any ambient light in the image whatsoever. So that becomes a challenge. So in the past, for fluoro photography, you usually had to do that at nighttime. So there's no ambient light, so you don't have to worry about it because it's such a weak effect. But when I was in Lembeh, I shot fluoro for 2.5 weeks during the day. And you're like, how did you do that? So because I had the A9 III, I was shooting shutter speeds of like 4,000th of a second. And so I would still use those same settings of f8 to f11, somewhere around there. Sometimes I'd drop down to f5.6. I'd still be shooting anywhere from 400 to 3200. But because the camera doesn't have a limit on what shutter speed I could use with a flash, I could take the shutter speed up to 4,000th of a second or higher. And as long as, if I don't have the strobe on, as long as I get a black frame when I'm taking the picture, I can do fluoro with a flash. So that's what I did. So because all the other times I've ever played around with fluoro, you have to do it on a night dive. So I didn't really have a lot of time on fluoro before. Because usually, even if you go to someplace like Lembeh or NLL or any of those places where you have your own dedicated dive guide or something, they're not going to do 3 or 4 night dives in a day. You get one, and it's not every single day because maybe there's tides, maybe there's currents, there's something going on, or they're tired, or they don't want to do that many dives, or you don't want to do that many night dives. So I probably shot on that one trip more fluoro shots than I shot my entire previous life because I could use that camera. This one was actually shot at night. This one was at Nudie Falls in Lembeh. And it's crazy because you could see that the only thing you see there is just the orange glowing on that nudie. And And the thing is, I was in the water. In the daytime, I probably never would have seen this thing. And definitely at night, I never would have seen this thing. What happened is I just had a sea of black because I have the yellow filter over my mask. I'm just looking in this sea of black under the ocean. And then I'm shining my fluoro light, and there's this like speck, like this big, just starts glowing crazy orange. I'm like, oh, let me go over to that thing. And so there it was. It was a really cool kind of effect. You know, there was interesting thing. I don't know the science behind it, but there's other crabs where the porcelain crabs where the claw wasn't glowing, because I took a picture of this one. I'm like, oh, this is so cool with all the colors on it and everything. And then I went to another one, and none of that red was on the other one. So the critters, while sometimes they look almost identical to each other in normal white light, when you put the fluoro on it, they actually look different. They glow differently. So with this guy just walking out in the middle of the day, it's like, I got to get this thing. And so I was able to pull the shot off. And the thing with this, because it's larger and because it has eyes, it really needs a very high ISO. So when I do that, you wind up you lighting up more of this, the substrate in there, which to me isn't particularly interesting, but it's subdued enough where to me it's okay. Somebody might say, well, why don't you use a snoot for that and you get rid of that? Well, snoots rob light. And the whole problem with fluoro photography is that you're battling against not having enough light from your strobe in the first place. So when you put it through a snoot, in a situation with something like this type of critter, which is actually pretty large, it's not going to expose enough for it. But still a cool shot nonetheless. Now, the other thing that's great about Lembe is there's a lot of dive sites, if not most of them, are black volcanic sand. So that helps out big time for not returning a lot of blue in it. If you look in some of this, you can see that there's some blue in it from it mixing with that sand. But if you had a critter in the Caribbean on the sand, you'll see it. It's like it's not perfect where all the yellow minuses all of the blue from the strobe. So so someplace like Lembe where you have the black volcanic sand works really well for critters that are in the sand. Thought this is interesting. It gives me the heebies when I see that, all the lice on that. But yeah, I thought it was interesting how they glow like that. Close up of it. This is also in Lembe, because you can tell because of the black sand. And this guy, I had to expose quite a bit to get any sort of light. I was trying to get some light in here so that we can see the eyes a little bit better. And but there's hermit crabs right out here that will glow. The shells glow really good on the hermit crabs out there. So if you want to do it here, there's not as much stuff here that fluoresces as, let's say, in like Lembe or in the Caribbean. But there's like some of the crabs, some of the shrimps, some of the anemones, most of the anemones out here. But the tube anemones sometimes do, sometimes don't. It just depends. And that's kind of the fun. You never know what you're going to get. It's like a box of chocolates. That one was in the Caribbean, so that one was down at a much lower ISO, probably around ISO 100 to get that. And then the kind of swirling effect, there's, I don't know if you call it a vortex lens or something. It's like a filter where it looks like it comes out of a cone and the cone gets chopped off in the front. And I just threaded this onto the front port, and it gives that kind of swirly kind of effect for it. But you can see here in the Caribbean how the blue light over in the corner, that's the sand getting lit up by the because it's more the white kind of tan sand, so it doesn't eliminate all of the blue for it. But in this case, I think it kind of works for the image. This is a good example of how like a hard coral can glow, but the fish don't. I found very few of these types of fish glow. Some of the gobies, their eyes will glow, maybe a little bit of their body, but then you see right through them. But these fish just did not glow. So I thought that was interesting where how they're being lit is they're being backlit pretty much by the glowing fluorescence of the hard coral itself. Get a head-on lizardfish shot. And the thing is, the lizardfish in the Caribbean don't have this red on them. I thought that was kind of interesting, where you think it's like, well, it looks very similar type of fish, but only the ones in Asia have I seen have that red on there. And that's just another lizardfish out of focus in the background there. Thought that was interesting. Yeah, these anemones, you can shoot these all day long and just get really cool different results from them. Try and get them like swaying back and forth. Another example of a fish that doesn't really glow too much. Another one of those swirl effects on a hard coral in Bonaire. And again, with the same type of vortex lens on it. I tried to do wide angle with it. The issue with doing the wide angle is, again, because it's such a weak effect, what happens is you really need to get a good exposure on it. So what I did was I set up on a tripod for a hard coral, and I had one of those Nauticam 130-degree WWL lenses on, and because inside I could put a yellow filter on the kit lens that goes inside of that. And so when I did that, I set up on tripod, and I took one of the Backscatter hybrid flashes because it has a test feature on it, so I can pop the strobe. So I just popped it. I did a long exposure on it at night and just popped it over and over and over and over on it to keep adding light into it. The problem is, again, the sand, right? The sand then took over the image. So if you have something where you're on black volcanic sand and you have some coral there, which there's a few places that have some of that stuff, then you could maybe get a little bit better of an exposure on it. Or if the coral head was up really high and far enough away, and you could kind of angle the camera away from the sand, which I didn't have any of those where I was shooting. And that would be another technique to try, to do some wide-angle fluoro stuff. I know recently I saw Alex Terrell doing some fluoro in Thailand, where he's at, and he had some pretty cool wide-angle stuff going on with some fluoro. So that was a lot of fun to see. And then another mushroom coral, it's like but it doesn't glow like the first one, right? It's like everything's different. You never know what you're going to get. And I kind of like how there's another soft coral in the background there to just add in a little bit more of interest into the photo there. The seahorse. This is one of those. It's just like this drab tan seahorse. And then I hit it with the fluoro, and it looks like this. So it's pretty dramatic, and not all of them glow like that. So you just gotta see. And one of the tube anemones in Lembe. This was shot at night. One of the few that I did do at nighttime. And it just doesn't even look like that when you put regular light on it. So it gets to be very, very different kind of a look. So that's my talk on fluoro. I don't know if you guys have any questions about anything.
We've got a couple of questions in chat.
Okay.
From Stephanie Doninger. She had the question of what settings would you use for any wide-angle fluorescence?
Pretty much the same type of thing, because that's going to be at night, because you're not going to be able to compete with the sun during the daytime like you do with macro, because it's just too much of wide of a of a lens there to knock that out. So number one, definitely at nighttime. Second thing is probably going to be like f8 is where I go. If you're using, depends on the lens that you're using. If you have something like one of those wet lenses that that's water corrected, so like either like the WWL, AOI has a 09 Pro. You've got Nauticam with the WACP. Those type of lenses, water contact optics, they've been corrected for underwater, so you can shoot them more wide open on the aperture and still maintain decent corners on it. So you could go down to f5.6, f4. And then your ISO is going to have to get jacked way up. You're probably talking at least 800, if not 1600 or higher, depending on your distance to the subject and also depending on how much the subject fluoresces. So it's like sticking to soft corals and hard corals for that, where they glow a lot brighter, will be easier to pull off. And then you're going to want to get the strobes as physically close to the subject as possible. For some, for the wide angle shots, just like barely just out of frame is what you do. You're not going to light up scatter. I mean, most of the scatter doesn't fluoresce, so I wouldn't be too worried about that. And then the other thing with the fluoro on that is if you could put it on a tripod and pop it multiple times, like I was saying earlier about that. That's the settings I would try and go in if I had a proper subject to shoot.
Second question from chat from Alex is, when you were using the A9 III, what lens were you using?
Well, I was using the A9 III, is the Sony 90mm macro is what I was using for that.
And then a question that just popped up from Mario: do you need one or two strobes when doing this?
You can get away with one for macro. You just got to put it like right on the front of the housing here. So if you had a strobe here, you would be like, your strobe would be like literally like right there for it, as close as you can physically get it to the subject. If you have two, you would put basically two of them right next to each other, right up on the subject. For most of these shots, I used one. If it was like something like the mantis shrimp, something larger, then I had two of them like right up out in front. And if something with the 90 lens that I'm shooting, if I'm a little bit further away, I might have the strobe arm all the way out as far as it can go over the subject, and it might be like that dramatic where I might have like this housing here. If the subject might be out here, my strobe is going to be like here. It can't be here. It has to be out here if it's a larger subject like that. You can't shoot through that much water with the fluoro and actually have it work. Anybody else? No?
I have
All
some
right, great.
questions.
Thanks for the fluoro talk.
I have
here.
some questions.
Great to be able to do it. And I can turn this maybe over to Thomas, since you were the judge.
Can I ask a
Can we
question?
go over the mini comp themes?
Thanks, Jim. That was super awesome, super groovy. All right, so coming up here, we've gone through our first 2 months there, so January and February are out. So next up, March, we've got nudibranchs, so a very popular subject there. April coming up, sunbeams, so get your sunball shots in there. That's got to be a fun one. May is a great one. We're already here, California, so enjoy some of the best diving in the world out here, and love to see some California-themed stuff. June would be snooted subjects, so good time to break out that controlled creative lighting and have fun there. July, super great one, black and white. If you're feeling especially inspired, you can break out that old Nikonos and scan some film. That would be awesome. August, another really fun one there, so abstracts. So once again, get weird with it. That can go in so many different directions. September is school, so I guess groups of subjects, schooling fish, that kind of thing. October, this kind of can maybe come along with sunbeams too, but ambient light, so turning off your artificial lighting there, shooting with what you got. November coming up, creative lighting, so Fluoro, one of the options there, so you can take everything you learned from Jim and apply that. Also, awesome things like creative lighting, so getting your lighting maybe off camera, long exposures, and I love it, get weird with it, so you'll have a ton of fun there. And then December will be the mini comp of the year, so that'll be the summary of it all. But yeah, thanks so much.
Yeah, we have one more question from the internets by Mr. Zoom user. For viewing only, are you in a fluoro jungle or desert? How many lumen LED just to see this effect? My mic is blocked. So it's usually a desert for the most part, especially in Asia. If you're in the Caribbean, it's a little bit more of a jungle because of so many hard corals around there fluoresce a lot. So it depends on where you're at. And then lumen LED, you can't really measure fluoro lights in lumens. So it's because the light energy is just so crazy low when you filter it. So you can't really call it by lumens. That being said, if you take, and again, this is where you see some lights out there that have UV built into them. The UV is not very bright. I haven't found it to be useful for videography, photography. You can find stuff with a UV light a little bit, but a light with a blue filter on it will work better. That being said, you kind of want something in the 4,000 or 5,000 lumen range and higher to use as a searching light would be good. And something with a spot beam will be a bit more intense when you do that. So I think that hopefully that answers the question enough on that. You could also ask the boys here at Backscatter, and they'll guide you on that journey too.
Mr. Zoom user has a follow-up question of, do you see colors the camera does not record?
No.
New question from Gabriel Jensen. What inspired Backscatter to make the fluoro system that it is delightfully niche?
Well, it certainly wasn't monetary, I'll tell you that, because it's so niche. So then it's because I did this probably 15 years ago or something. It was, kind of fads come and go in photography and underwater photography. I remember trying it like a number of years ago. It's kind of like, that's cool. I could see how it'd be cool, but it wasn't really doing it. So then when Backscatter, when we came up with the hybrid flash, it's so bright that I'm like, this could be a really good thing because you need to shove so much light through that filter just to get some sort of weak effect back. And back, 15 years ago, we were shooting Enon Z240s. And so those are, around a guide number 24 strobe. And you put that filter on the front, and it was filtering out so much light, you could only do like very, very small macro stuff. You wouldn't, like those lizardfish, be difficult to pull off. And so then I was like, wow, if we got this strobe that has all this power to it, let's throw a fluoro filter on it. So then we did that, and that's how we did it.
New question from Stephanie Doninger. Does high-speed sync decrease the strobe output power too much to be usable during the day to allow for the higher shutter speeds?
Absolutely. The HSS is such a weak effect, again, because what's happening with HSS, or high-speed sync, for those of you who don't know what high-speed sync is, it allows you to use the flash at shutter speeds higher than what the camera is rated for. And the way, because what happens is when you have two curtains or two shutters on the camera, you have the front one and the rear one, or the first one or the second one, whatever you want to call it. So the first one drops, exposes the sensor. The second one drops and covers the sensor. The time difference between those things happening is your shutter speed. That's basically what it is. Now, as you can imagine, this is moving. The shutter is physically moving, so it can only move so fast. And so if you're using shutter speeds that are above, let's say, 1/250th of a second, it can't travel any faster. So what happens is the first one's coming down, and before it clears the sensor, the second one's already coming down. So there's just this little sliver. And as you go up higher in your shutter speeds, that sliver gets smaller and smaller and smaller to sometimes where it's just like the width of like half of a pencil is what's actually exposed on the sensor, and it travels down. And that's why if you tried to use a strobe with it, well, it can only light that little sliver. So, so what HSS does is it pulsates the strobe. This is for any strobe. Doesn't matter if it's underwater, topside, HSS works the same way. So the strobe will pulsate at a certain frequency, usually many times per second. And so as the shutter moves, the strobe's pulsating, so then that little sliver is getting lit up the entire way on the sensor. Now what happens, and this is a long explanation, but what happens is, because it's pulsating like that, it's using a lot of energy to put out that light. So when you're using HSS, when you see the strobe, it looks like it's firing at full power, and it probably is with all that pulsating going on. But what's really happening is the pulsating is such a weak effect because you only have this little sliver that's being lit that whole time. So that being said, is the if you compared a shot that was shot with a strobe in normal mode at a full dump compared to high-speed sync at a full dump for high-speed sync, the high-speed sync would be much, much less brighter, and certainly not bright enough for fluorescence photography. Yes. Hi, so we're gonna Thomas is gonna get you mic so the people on the interwebs can hear you.
So is this anything like glow in the dark, where the more light that it absorbs, the brighter it becomes, or is this different?
I don't know. Because it's like, well, I have a theory that maybe at a certain extent it just won't get any brighter, but I need another brighter strobe to do it. So but I just don't know if I throw any more light at it if it will get any brighter. But my theory is there is a limit to it. I mean, if I had a strobe 4 times brighter, would it give me 4 times more fluorescence? I don't think so. Because I've turned the strobe, I've experimented and turned the strobe down, and it doesn't seem like it's a one-stop drop equals a one-stop drop on the fluorescence. So I don't know at this point. Yes, Mackenzie?
When you were doing the fluoro during the day, were you just kind of doing a guess and check as to what was going to fluoresce, or were you just going to subjects that you knew would fluoresce?
A little bit of both. So because I'd never shot fluoro during the day before, so then what I just started to do was I just went in hard corals and soft corals usually fluoresce, and there's a lot of soft corals in Lembe, so I just went up to one and took a picture and see what I got. And then sometimes I went up to something I thought might have fluoresced. It didn't when I took a shot. So I would take a test shot, just go up to it, see what happens. If it was and then I could see, this either it did fluoresce and maybe it doesn't look cool though, and I move on to something else, or wow, this is really different. I never expected that, and then I would go ahead and work on it. But then what happened is because the strobe has a video light in it as well, I could then turn that on, and if I got really close to something, like this close to it with the strobe, then with the target light in it, I could then start to see, that some things on that are fluorescing, and then I could start seeing other things, like the one of that one hard coral in the picture. It was I could see looking at the colors. I'm like, oh man, that's going to fluoresce. I could tell just by looking at it because it's already glowing, So it's because the blue light it's in the spectrum that we're standing in right now, right? And so this one is like the really strong ones. You can see that's going to fluoresce really good. So that's how I did. I just kind of hunted around a little bit during the day, take some test shots, and I started learning. But then just when I thought I was getting the hang of it, I'd do something. I'm like, wow, that's different. So just experiment. All right, we got another one from the interwebs.
Thomas. Another question from Mario. Which strobe do you recommend for this photography? Can I use the Mini Flash 2 or 3 for this, or should I be considering something bigger?
You should definitely be considering something not necessarily bigger, but brighter. We do, Backscatter does have, and this isn't supposed to be a Backscatter commercial here, but we do have a filter that goes on the front of the Backscatter 4300 light. And that one is good for the video light, but it also fits on the Mini Flash. But I would never recommend it for the Mini Flash because the Mini Flash isn't a very bright strobe. It's a macro strobe designed to be close up and designed to, it doesn't need a lot of light for regular macro photography. So on things like some of the stuff in the Caribbean that glows like really brightly, yes, you could use it on that, but like that lizardfish shot I showed you, not in a million years would it be able to pull it off. It's just not enough light. But bigger strobes. There's other ones. Icolite. They have a fluorescence filter for their DS series strobes, so that works really well. I've seen that. And then there's a company called Nightsea who makes fluorescent filters for a number of different strobes. So they make it for CNC, for Enon, and a couple others as well. So if you have one of those strobes already, then you could check out either the Icolite strobe. They call it a dichromatic filter, which is kind of the scientific name for it. But and then Nightsea also makes it as well.
No more questions from the interwebs at this moment.
All right, we got one over here. Thomas is on his way.
Hey, thanks. Wondering if, I guess everything you've talked about was a saltwater environment. Have you worked on this in freshwater environments, or any suggestions for freshwater subjects?
No. And I would, for suggestions, it would, again, if I'm just trying to think about this freshwater environments, it's like you need some sort of organic material, right? So in freshwater environments, you got a lot of rocks. I would imagine that moss would probably fluoresce. I guess it would fluoresce red because anything that's kind of that green chlorophyll-y kind of color tends to fluoresce red, or it might not fluoresce at all. And some things might, and some things might not. As far as things with eyes, your guess is as good as mine on what would fluoresce and not. I would think like maybe like a crayfish potentially might do that. But like I've never seen like I wouldn't think like a bass or something that would fluoresce at all. I've never seen that type of fish in freshwater fluoresce. Like no parrotfish, no angelfish, none of those types of things. It's like gobies. So it's like I really don't know, but that would be my guess. But please let me know. If you're going to go in hop in the Big Sur River or something, or check it out, that'd be fun. Ah, there you go. All right. Anyone else? Any other questions? All right, cool. Well, thank you guys for coming out, and thank you everybody for coming out on the Zoom call as well. And just a reminder, if you're not a member, please join and help support your local or not so local club if you're on the Zoom call. And again, second Friday of every month, we'll be here, and we'll have an announcement soon on what the next speaking topic is going to be. So keep an eye out for that. All right, thank you guys for coming.